Coronavirus is starting to mess with me. I miss the sense of home I have when I'm at the conventions and with friends. I miss the flowers in all the places that I live. I miss exploring to find new places and new ideas. But most importantly, I miss traveling from place to find out new places or to go visit old friends. If you asked me where I was from, I'd tell you the Northwest. And of course Hawaii. I tell people I'm from the Northwest, and I include all of it, which tends to screw people up because they think you can only be from one place. I basically have a place where I stay and consider a headquarters. However, the entire Northwest is my home. Which brings us to the subject of this video. There are multiple systems that can be a basis for civilization. Most of these systems actually show up in the civilization, it's just one is the main use. We'll be going through this from a historical point of view. The first one is so old, we don't actually know when it began. We can give you a guess, but honestly, it's all up in the air. So, we have the producers, the people who make art, and the people who make food. And they can be very different from each other and yet do a very similar thing. The first one is food. A civilization cannot exist if everybody is starving. But this is more than just creating food. It's about creating food for everyone, being able to take various items and turn them into edibles. He said edibles, man. He said edibles. The people in the food processing often don't have a connection to the food they make. Not because the food can't be cute and wonderful and kind. It's because if they don't, it gets difficult to eat. It gets difficult to kill. So they name their cows like Cheeseburger or T-Bone because they know that this animal is there for food and there is nothing else for it. Civilizations based on agrarian societies tend to have one small village in the middle while everyone else goes out and takes care of their cattle, their crops, and other things. Then they go into town, do trade, get the supplies they need, and then go back out to their home. So you can see that in the way the village is built. Even to this day, we will find villages and towns aimed just like that. In the opposite but similar corner is art. Unlike food production, the artist is very passionate and very emotional about what they're doing. Every scene, every movement, every idea needs to have a passion, a type of emotion that needs to be evoked. In film, the lighting person, the cameraman, the director, the actor are all trying to evoke an emotion, a feeling that you have for what you're seeing. And this creates the movie that you're viewing, the ideas in your head. They often work together, both the artist and the production, as one whole, creating the civilization that you think of. Sure, the artists are showing off these amazing skills, but many of the production people, the lighting guys, the guys having to move wires, all those others, they really don't care. It's just a business to them. They don't actually have an emotional connection in the same way that the artists do. As another example, a restaurant could really show you what I mean. For example, you have the chef and the cooks, who are very much so artists when they work. However, the people making the food below them are often production people. The person creating the food is not the same as the artist who works on the food to make it taste the greatest. The entire video game industry is producers. Then we have the travelers. Their entire point of life is the trails and methods to get from point A to point B. They don't care about the civilization made by walls or rules, or whether or not some kind of artist is being used. Their point is to go from here to there. We often don't recognize them because part of their culture is to become the next culture that they're in, to know about the culture that they're dealing with. We know these people from the far reaches of the Pacific Ocean and the Polynesians traveling from the Americas all the way to Asia, to the native tribes who covered the Americas, from the Comanche down to the Guarani. This culture is hard to spot because they often adapt to the cultures around them, starting to speak the language and have the accent. But then they go to another culture and they speak in that accent, in that language. And so everyone goes, well, they're from here, aren't they? And you have to explain, no, their accent, the way they move, all that change is their culture, or a specific idea. I know this culture really well because it's the one I grew up in. My dad would move us around about once a year. There was actually a point where I had moved more times than years I had lived. And we're not talking into my teens, I meant into my 30s. The entire point is to travel, to go to the next place. And that's why it's been really hard for me to stay home, because I can't travel, and it's what I've been raised to do. It even shows up in the games I enjoy playing. Finally, we have the civilization of walls and rules. This is the civilization that shows up in history the most. Not the fault of the traveling organizations or any of the others. They're just the ones who wrote it all down. The first recorded moment of it is that of the Babylonians in Mesopotamia. They had everything written down on walls with rules. They're also the ones who created paperwork and bureaucracy, which should explain more than you really wanted to think about. Walls and rules are designed for large amounts of people, and you can often see cities and other ideologies based on that. Every person has a place, and every place has a thing, and if you try to go against those rules, you are in fact breaking all of civilization and will be treated with harsh responses. In James May's Cars of the People, there's moments where he describes how you found yourself in society based on the car you drove. But my personal favorite example is that of King Louis XIV, who had all of the courtiers of his palace become his servants. The guy who took over his chamber pot was higher ranked than the guy who took care of his folding sheets, because he was closer to the king. That's both brilliant and disgusting at the same time. It's also something that helped lead to the French Revolution, which, as you can see, was a bad idea for his progeny. These civilizations often worked together to make a larger civilization. The travelers would go from place to place. The walls and rules people would build better roads. The people who made food and art would have their own little corners where they weren't bothered, and they could go do what they wanted. This created a larger system for everybody to enjoy. However, it was still all top-down from that point. We now have a new civilization that's forming, one based on the internet and its ideology. It's similar to the Traveler because you can become anyone you want, or know anyone you want. There are no rules in that way. It can be traced to hackers, those people who went into computers, figured out how they worked, and then shared that information with others. It started in MIT, where a bunch of train enthusiasts decided to look at a computer and realized they were very similar. So, they began to open it up. This created an open source system where people could study and find out ideas without having to be charged or expecting to be charged. It also meant that if somebody wanted something for free, they deserved to have it. You only get paid if they say you deserve it, which means you have to build something that they respect enough that they're willing to pay for it. Anybody can talk to anybody. Anybody in the world is free and capable of talking and being with anybody. However, your place in society is not secured, because there is no place in society. It's merely how much have you contributed to this area and whether or not somebody respects that contribution. The internet is a lot like the Traveler, and because of that, the rules of walls and rules are kind of going against it. Specifically because travelers enjoy trade more than they enjoy place in society. It also means that they tend to destroy the places of walls and rules, and that scares the living snot out of the walls and rulers. We're already seeing this happen as it destroys schools, many entertainment industries, and even taxi and delivery services. It's not really destroying the taxi cab or any of those others. It's destroying the bureaucracy that was created for the companies beforehand, which has made many people want to build thicker walls and greater rules. So home to me is the entire Pacific Northwest. That's Idaho, Oregon, and Washington, and Hawaii. It's not just one place in there, it's all of them. And I can travel and see my friends through the internet, but I can't travel and see my friends in real life. And that's what's got me really bummed.